like to solve world problems on these lunch and learns that we do together. I'm going to turn my email off because today I feel very popular and loved by people. And they're showing that love through email today. That is the love language of March 26th. So anyways, we're going to go through and talk about joint visits today. And I've got a very, very short PowerPoint presentation that I have with just a couple slides with research and information that Dathan and Melissa had shared based on our training that we went to in December of 19, kind of right before the pandemic started. But I really, we actually talked about joint visits in our last PSP cohort meeting, which is a great group, great, and truthfully, it's a smaller group, and we've had some fluctuation, but Katie Holting's in there, Jocelyn's in there, Angele is in there, Amy Cook is in there, and then Mary Ellen, and I typically facilitate pretty much Mary Ellen because she's kind of heading that. But we talked about joint visits and really spent a lot of time talking about it more, and it seemed like a reflective supervision discussion. So that's what I'm hoping we can do today. I want to obviously go through some information, but I would really like to talk to you guys and hear from you, and whether you put that in the chat and Stacy reads those for me. See how I just did that there, Stacy? You didn't even know that was your job. Or if you want to unmute and share out loud, that's totally fine too. But, really, I would love to hear and some things for you guys to think about as I go through the initial information. What's going well with joint visits with you right now? And with you being the FSC and also with you being a joint visitor, and what are some things that are challenging for you in joint visits, regardless of, if it's a situation or if it's because of the pandemic this year, kind of what are your challenges right now? And then what are some things that we can do to support one another moving forward? So again, just some things for you guys to think about. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen to go through just so we can kind of walk through, like I said, just some research, what we know about joint visits and typically where they start. And a lot of times that's through primary coaching at team meetings, by you guys coming with a question and then really asking for help, and whether that help is ideas to take back to the family, or whether that help is requesting a joint visit and having a provider come out there with you. So really, this is where I see a lot of our joint visits starting. And one of the pieces that I've really noticed over the last year is we've lost that collaboration time after team meeting, where we have the team meeting, we go through our agenda, and then everybody sticks around and hangs out for a little bit, and you guys schedule together and you would talk about, kind of what you needed as you planned that visit and got it on the books, so to speak. And I know we've lost that time because we're not face to face and haven't been for the last year, and even looking over the next 3 months, we won't be. So I know that that's been a challenge for you guys, and that would be one thing I would be really curious to hear is, how have you tried to overcome that particular challenge, losing that collaboration time with one another that was carved out weekly, and I know that you guys value very much. So and that's kind of what we really think about when you come to team meeting. Again, thinking about what do you need from the team, and sometimes you guys know that, and sometimes I think you figure it out throughout the course of a coaching. And one of the things that just moved my computer, sorry. One of the pieces of information that Dathan and Melissa have said from the very beginning is if a primary coaching opportunity lasts longer than 10 minutes, probably we need to offer a joint visit and see if that's something you need. So the way that the research says, again, if we can't coach you with strategies and you don't have a good plan moving forward as a primary service provider, that's what Dathan and Melissa recommend based off their research of primary coaching. And I've noticed our facilitators, both Molly and Megan, have done that this year, just simple reminding you guys of that. And I think that's really important because a lot of us have joined at various parts of the year. You know, Angel's been here about a little bit over a year. Katie and Jocelyn joined last summer. Amy Cook joined in January. So at any given time, we've got some people on our team that are fairly new to the process. And that's why, as long as that facilitator provides us with those simple reminders, that can also provide some in the moment teaching and coaching to our new staff who are joining on too. So again, that's something that we've talked about in our facilitator meetings, just some of those gentle reminders that are all hopefully helpful to everybody. Something just popped up on my screen, like a message. Yes, yeah, that reminder has been very assuring and very helpful. Yeah, I think that's, again, it's those, you know, Lori Arn always said, you know, I like to walk away with, you know, one nugget in my pocket, you know, from team meeting. And if that's the nugget, I think, again, that really honors the work that you guys are doing to provide services to Fidelity, looking at the primary service provider model. So again, we're always working towards that. Sometimes as we've built, I think we've done a really nice job over the last years, really talking about this particular piece where a family has requested another discipline. And instead of playing keep away of services, which was a term that Dathan and Melissa had talked about, and I liked that. It reminded me of, you know, old-fashioned keep away in elementary school. No one wants to be in the middle. But it did. That's kind of how I felt about how we've navigated some of these conversations in the past. And I really like what I'm hearing when you guys come to team meeting. And if you're asking for a specific discipline joint visit, you know, mom, you're saying, you know, mom would like a speech therapist to join. And other times I hear you guys saying, you know, I would like a provider to come support me with language. And as an administrator, what I hear in those two different questions is one, a parent has requested something very specific and we're honoring that. And two, that second scenario, you guys are really, again, honoring that fidelity of the PSP by looking for support in the area of development and not requesting a specific discipline. So I think that is 100% okay to do. And if a family is asking for a specific discipline, I still think having that information, you know, why, you know, again, tell me, you know, what are you wanting to work on? You know, what are your priorities? You know, what have we talked about that, you know, maybe you feel like you're not being supported? Still getting some of that background information. So when you come to the team and request help, we're making sure that we make that best match for you possible to go back to the family with that support. So again, this was this not keep away of services was kind of like a light bulb for me, because how I learned things 10 years ago, my interpretation of the information 10 years ago was very different. So I don't know if that's all my brain allowed me to hold on to 10 years ago, or if the message has changed. But again, I think you guys have done a really nice job of navigating that and requesting help at the team meeting. So I'm going to kind of put it back to you guys. And again, I know nobody likes Zoom at this point, but what are your experiences coming to the team and asking for help during primary coaching. How do you feel? What are our strengths, and what are things that we could possibly work on as an agency together? Sue Jones, silent pauses are they're so hard. It's hard to know if people are even listening to you on Zoom. It's hard to know if they think you're funny. It's hard to know, like, it's really hard. Right now I can see Susie, Haley, and Nicole on my screen, and none of them have their video on, which is totally fine. But again, like, I've got no input on if this is sink or swim right now. So
okay, this is Laura and I'm folding laundry. So, so I think, and I think this is a good thing, but I feel like my joint visits look totally different depending on who I bring in and what I'm bringing them in for. And I feel like sometimes it's very defined and it's maybe an eating situation. I mean, I can think of a couple I've had with Deirdre where I feel like I'm just kind of there and I'm obviously learning, but I feel like they're kind of asking the questions, probably more facilitating because they know the information that they're needing to know. And then there's times that I have joint meetings where it's very both of us together, I don't know, kind of give and take, and maybe we veer off. It's not just because I'm there as PT support doesn't mean we spend all the time on PT, and we might end up talking about communication or so. I just feel like they always look really different.
I would agree with that. And I think if they look the same, I would argue we're not providing individualized services. And I think they're going to look different based on what you need, what the family needs, what the family's awareness of, why they're wanting another provider in. I don't ever think a joint visit should look the same from person to person. So I like that you're saying that, Laura. I think that's real life.
Hey, Monica, it's Jane. I'll jump in if you can hear me.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. One thing that I think we do well, and I think it's been with your guidance, is to just be allowed to have joint visits as much or as little as we want. I know sometimes it's probably not very cost effective, but sometimes I feel like I just need someone with me. Mm-hmm. Just an extra person in the home with me, just to make me feel a little more comfortable and a little more excited about my work. And the other piece of what we could work on is kind of along that same, I will put someone on for joint visits and then maybe I don't really need them anymore, or as much as I put down. And I never really know, like, how do I document that so that I'm following the kind of the dosage on the IFSP, but also I'm not wasting people's time to come out just because IFSP says once a month.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a really good, and that kind of put me on to this next slide. Looking at the three reasons in our books about why joint visits can happen are the PSP needs help and support that can't be provided within a coaching opportunity and team meeting, or a team member maybe coaching but really wants to get their eyes on that kid, and obviously another reason is that a parent asks, and I think there are a couple more reasons. I think one of them, I think, I'm not sure who's talking.
Just doing a Zoom meeting.
Oh. But Monica, before you go on, there's a few more kind of comments related to what we were talking about a second ago.
Perfect. Oops.
Kind of point those out. So Erica was agreeing in a joint visit, depending on who she's with, not always sure whether she should be in the lead and they should jump in on certain questions, or they should lead and she should observe, that kind of thing. Same ideas of what we're talking about. And Teresa says, Monica, you're living what her husband lives every day in his work world. She says, I turned on my video after you comment as you helped her think of that. And then Megan had an interesting comment during primary coaching, kind of stumbling with how to ask reflective questions that aren't yes and no questions.
Mhm. Yeah, a lot of things here. Teresa is obviously the easiest. Teresa, that's, that's a great reminder. That's how George, have your video on. So yeah, so that helps. Yeah.
And I appreciate you reminding us, Monica, because although I know that's his world, I don't always think about that when I am on the computer. So a way I can improve better. Thank you.
We're always looking to do it differently. Yeah, and I think that to answer Erica's question, which was something that we had talked about a little bit before too, and Megan, we can circle back. One of the tools, and I'm not a big, Dathan and Melissa love their forms. We all know they love their forms very, very much. There's one form in particular that I actually really like to address exactly what Erica was asking about. And it's really, what is the role of the FSC and what is the role of the secondary service provider during the joint visit? And ideally, all of that should be planned and shared prior to walking in the family's home, so we know what we're doing, and we can present an air of that. And this was something we talked about with Katie and Jocelyn and Amy and Mary Ellen last time, was really looking through this joint visit planning tool. I did have our TA type this up in a Word document, and I'll share that with you guys if you wanted to do it. And even if you just looked through this, I think this would help organize some of those joint visits. So again, when you walked in, you felt like you had a plan. How many of you guys are currently using this, or at least keep this in the back of your head prior to a joint visit?
I would say, this is Laura again. I would say I don't, but I'm very interested in looking at it. But I definitely utilize time beforehand, whether it's talking in the car on the way there, prior to, and or afterwards, kind of a debrief when we're in the car. I mean, a lot of times it's like, do you have time to talk? I'll call you. And then we'll kind of talk about, was that what you needed? Was that the support that you needed? And we do always, I mean, I think typically if I bring somebody in, I start the visit as far as kind of that facilitating and talk about kind of what the joint plan was from the last visit, but then ask, is that still the support that you're needing, or do things look differently? And then kind of puts it back to the parent to address what support they're looking for from the therapist that's joining.
Mm-hmm.
There's quite a bit of agreement in the chat with that people are not necessarily using that tool specifically, but sort of have these ideas and are trying to chat before and after. It also looks like I missed a comment from Sue. She says, sometimes it's tricky if a pediatrician recommends a therapist when they're already receiving that same service.
And that might be more kind of my ECSC specific, because a lot of times I'll get, oh, they want a speech pathologist in there, and we've been working on speech for, a year kind of thing. I just bring them in, I was just like, okay, and we'll bring somebody in, but then it's kind of overlap. We're not sure what to do after a while. but they want them in there. So they're in there.
Yeah. And, honestly, I would like to take any concerns over any kind of financial reasons that we may or may not do a joint visit. Like, don't think of it as a waste of time. Don't think of it as a waste of money. We're not in a position where we have to pinch pennies like that. So if you've got a service on an IFSP and the family's wanting it and you as a PSP aren't needing it, you might do it. I mean, again, it's on the IFSP. There's no reason not to. If anything, you as a therapist are going to get more confirmation that you're on the right track. And sometimes that's really nice when people are like, yeah, you've got this. And so again, regardless of where we are in our career, it's affirming what we're doing. And again, like Sue has talked about, addressing different discipline areas, even though you're not a named discipline. And if a pediatrician wants, something, again, we don't want to withhold that. I think it's navigating the differences of providing special education in a home looks drastically different than receiving private services through a clinic or a hospital. And so the physicians are trying to take what they know about therapy, which is a medical model, and make it fit into our puzzle, which is special education. So let's just continue to help and educate and make them aware. And again, we're not in a position where that's a concern of mine, truthfully, from an administration standpoint. So sometimes joint visits are nice just because, and we talked about this in team meeting, but it's been a hard year and there's a lot of hard things going on with families. And sometimes with as much work as you guys do solo, it's nice just to have a colleague with you so you don't feel, isolated and like you're doing this all alone.
That's what I was going to say. At least it usually always makes it more fun for the family and for me, it seems.
I mean, seriously, right? And then if the family doesn't show up, you and your joint provider could go grab coffee or something, I mean, or do some CompuClaim documentation. I mean, there's always that, right?
And Judy's agreeing. She says, I'm grateful we don't have to financially justify it. I always think of it as a learning and training opportunity. Even if I'm the one being brought in, I always learn something from the other provider, and she's encouraged.
Yes, I think those are important things. And, again, I think, bringing back everything to what's the plan? What's the plan at the visit? And that's done before the visit. And I know realistically, you're not going to be able to do this and fill this out before every visit. And your your communication might be on the way to a visit with a provider. That's real life. Absolutely. But again, even taking that time to plan for 5 or 10 minutes, that's huge. And it looks different, I think, walking into that home when you've been able to share as PSP some of these concerns. The number C is, who's going to take the lead? And why? And so that was something in Erica's question, like, what is her role and what should she do? And, what does that look like during the visit? So that is, I think, really important to decide prior to walking in the door. And then looking at D, what's the role of the person, who's not taking the lead? And what does that look like? And again, it's totally okay as a service provider to not be actively participating in therapy. I know speech therapists, we really like to feel like we're doing speech all of the time. So that's hard for us. But it's okay. And if you as FSC have primarily just done documentation, you can bill that as FSC. You can bill that as early childhood special instruction. There's other codes that we have that sometimes can make us feel better as therapists on how we're billing and documenting specific numbers like that. But, I would say always have, if you can do those couple things, who's going to take the role and why, what are we going to target? And then what's my role as secondary? That would be fantastic. One of the things we talked about is, obviously planning what happens after the visit, but making sure that you take time with your secondary service provider to touch base after the visit and debrief. And I think that's sometimes where we can get in our cars and drive away and go on to the next thing. But talk with me about kind of what that debriefing looks like for you currently, whether it's going well or it's not going well because you're not doing it. And again, when you have done it, how have you noticed changes in your role as an early intervention provider?
This is Kelly Mason. Jana and I have a family that we see together sometimes a couple times a week, and we usually talk before and after about the family. And it's usually like after, when we're talking, we kind of talk about how the visit went and what the plan is kind of next time based on how that visit went. So I find that helpful.
Thank you for sharing that.
I find it helpful. And I think, Kelly, you do this well when I've had visits with you. Getting in the car after the visit, you'll just call me from the car as we're driving to the next places that we're going to. So we use that, 10 minutes or whatever. I've appreciated that.
I wanted to comment on that real quick because I've had some really nice conversations with a lot of you over the last couple, 2 or 3 weeks, looking at goal setting. And I can't remember which one of you said this, but Kelly, I'm going to pay you a compliment. One of your joint providers has commented to me about how great it is that you do exactly what Stacy just said. Like on the way out to your car, you say, hey, I'll call you when I get in the car, and you get in and you drive away and you make that phone call and you don't have those conversations on the driveway. Because one, most of the time, the family's going to see you talking on the driveway. And even if it's just personal things, they're always going to think you're talking about them because that's what humans do. We're kind of egocentric beings. We like to think people talk about us and think about us a lot. So I think that that's a compliment to how you guys are trying again to honor that professionalism and making sure you're honoring that family's, confidentiality and really doing that. So I know that, again, a lot of you do that. That had been specifically mentioned to me by someone about Kelly. So thanks for keeping those, those little things do make a big difference with families.
I'd like to thank my dog. I'm just kidding. Another piece is that I try not to talk as we're walking up to the house because I just feel like there's so many cameras now. Like, I don't know what people hear. And then I also am like waiting till I drive away in my car because sometimes I can hear people on their Bluetooth in their car and it's clear. And I can hear everything they're saying. So I may want to say, oh my gosh, I can't believe, but I will wait until I drive away.
That's a really good point, because when I started early intervention 17 years ago, there was none of that stuff. I had like a TomTom GPS unit, like to get directions. Like there was no cell phones with iMaps and Google Maps. So yeah, those are, again, tiny little things that really do make big differences. TomToms are terrible. I don't disagree with you. And probably most people don't even know what they are. So yes, Laura, I did that too. Printed MapQuest directions. Yep. That was early intervention, hashtag 2001 to 2008, probably. Talk with me if you're comfortable. At the end of a joint visit, what this looks like, this conversation, this debriefing with the family. When you're asking did the families get what they need? We ask that a lot during our primary coaching opportunities, during team meeting. And I love it. And I do think it's really difficult to say, no, I didn't get what I needed. But again, that's why we kind of have that, okay, if things are taking 10 minutes, we probably know you need a little bit more. How are those conversations going with families when you kind of put that in their lap? Did you find this joint visit helpful? Again, did you get what you needed from us?
This is Laura. I feel like I feel like it goes well. And I feel like if I ever sense that there's, and I probably do this even not if I feel there's a hesitancy. If I've had a joint visit, the next time I go back, I usually start by following up with the joint visit again. Partially because there's things then that they've incorporated into what they're doing, but also just to bring it back around because maybe they really needed more support, or maybe there were questions and they didn't feel comfortable bringing them up in front of the person that was there. So I feel like usually it's, oh, this was great. This was wonderful. Great ideas. Thank you. And we'll talk about when they want that support to come back out, if they want it to come back out. But then I do usually follow up the next time I'm there as well.
I think, yeah, those are great points, Laura.
And I can read this comment from Megan. She says, I feel more confident about my joint planning as the FSC with the initial support visit, and definitely do not do as well joint planning for the ongoing support visits.
Can I ask why you think that there's a shift in that between the initial and then follow-up visits?
Yeah, sorry, I'm cleaning up my kitchen. I just, from the first visit, the first initial visit, I mean, I'm like, okay, they're coming in like kind of blind. So I definitely want to make sure they have the information and pass the primary coaching piece. Cause I feel like a lot of the joint planning can happen in that primary coaching piece too. But then like I have, several different providers coming with me ongoing because that's what's on my IFSP. That's what the parents want. And I guess it's just like, okay, we're just in this routine. And I think that's the shift for me, is probably just kind of an afterthought, for lack of a better term.
I think I
Yeah.
kind of get what you're saying. And sometimes if I'm doing joint visits with somebody kind of ongoing, it comes to a point where I'm not sure why exactly I'm there. Back to that whole role kind of thing. Like, am I there to just support this parent, this family, or am I there to support the primary caregiver? Or am I just here because I'm supposed to be because it's on the IFSP? Or, what's the major reason for my being there?
And sometimes I may not always have that answer, because I just have, more recently, Susie would know, just a terrible experience with the family and joint visits. And so I just sometimes I'm just like, okay, if that's what the family wants, then that's what we'll do. So, but it's important, I guess, to remember just to say, well, this is why I'm having you come. I just know I need to do better about that with my ongoing support services. Because sometimes I wonder, it's like, well, I don't really feel like I need the support, but the family feels like because they have a speech therapist or a PT, then they're doing what feels right to them. But I guess it's important just to make sure that I keep reminding and joint planning and saying, hey, this is kind of how I'm feeling. How are you feeling? And definitely something that I need to take on more as that FSC.
Kind of related to that, if it's okay, if it's my turn to talk. So I think I feel the same way, Megan. And I was, just thinking about how we were talking about, debriefing afterwards, but to pay a compliment to Jocelyn, she did a really good job when I had her come help me with a kiddo, of also doing it beforehand. And so maybe even if it's a phone call on the way to the appointment, so that you can both kind of, debrief each other, and the FSC can tell the support, like, okay, here's what happened at our last visit, especially if you're not going together every single visit. That might be just as important once we get that ongoing support, is that pre and post discussion. I personally like it right before and after the visit, just because that's how my brain works. But Jocelyn did a really good job when she first was going to help me, and she actually reached out and was like, hey, let's schedule a time to chat before I come out so we can kind of go through this. And I have a feeling, I mean, now that I'm looking at the form and remembering, she probably asked some of those questions. We probably did that. So just a lot. I don't know if Jocelyn's here, but I'm just giving her a little shout out there. So
I don't know if she's here either, but we're recording this, so we'll make sure she gets this.
oh gosh, and I have like the dorky headband on. It's a Bluetooth headband, so I can hear and hear, and it stays on my ears really well. It's great for like working out or at night if you don't want anybody to hear when you're watching TikToks.
I thought it was maybe like a snake light. I didn't know what was going on.
No, it's a Bluetooth headband. I got it for Christmas. I love it, but it makes me look like a dork.
Awesome. Yeah,
Monica, this is Angie. Oh,
perfect. Yep, go for it.
Okay. First of all, I apologize earlier. I think my mute was not on. So if you heard like a loud blower and someone talking, that was me to my brother on a walk. But I was going to say my biggest, I feel like, challenge with joint visits is with my kiddos that have multiple needs, and parents have priorities in every area of development, and trying to balance out my role in really kind of honoring the system of the primary provider, but then getting them the support that I feel that I need help with, but that they feel they need. And I feel like for ongoing kiddos, when you're talking about seeing them for 2 or 3 years, I feel like that gets very challenging for me, at least. So I'm always looking for guidance in that area of how to do it right or do it best. But anyways.
Yeah, that's another piece I think too is, when you have families who do have a lot of joint visitors on the IFSP, and you're bringing out, as maybe, Angie being a PT in the primary, she's bringing out, Stacy one week and Dana one week, and maybe Megan McGee one week, and maybe even, Susan's on there for vision. And there comes a point in, like, those are all necessary and good, and we want to provide that, but what do you need as a primary service provider too? Because your role is obviously coordinating and monitoring the delivery of services as a family service coordinator, but also providing family with the support and guidance, and making sure you've got time with the family too. And this is something I've talked with a lot of you about over the last 2 or 3 years is, if you've got a family who has a lot of joints providers, and you feel like every week you're bringing someone out there with you, and you want to go out and do a visit on your own. So maybe you're seeing a family twice a week, and once is with a joint provider. Again, this is not keep away of services. You guys don't have to justify to me why you want to see a family more. I don't know the family. I don't know the situation. I don't know what that looks like. I'm always happy to talk through these more complicated situations with you, but please always know you have my support. And I do understand you can't do the things that you need or want to do as a primary service provider if you always have someone with you. So again, let's problem solve together on what that looks like, so you've got some time to implement the things everyone else is teaching you, plus then targeting some of those areas that you're really wanting to focus on too through the IFSP outcomes. There's not a right or a wrong way to do this, which I think is the lovely part, but I think that also makes it really hard when we live in this gray area, and we want to do things right. But again, every family situation is different, and that's why it does constantly look different.
And I think, Monica, this is Laura again, real quick. I think I'm trying to think, a lot of times I've had, like, if I'm being pulled in as the consult, and then the need for that day steers away from motor a little bit, and then the people that brought me in will be like, I'm so sorry, because they feel like it was a waste of my time. Or I could be the person on the other end, like feeling like, oh my gosh, that was kind of a sidetrack I wasn't thinking was coming. but I also think like that's just the nature of what we do. And so like if it ends up being a visit where that primary needs to address primary things that are going on, I don't think that they should feel like they can't do that just because a supporting therapist is there.
Mhm. I think that's a great
I
point,
agree.
and why I would say kind of that joint planning before a visit would be important. So the visit looks cohesive, and you're not doing PT things while I'm trying to do speech things, and it's confusing. So again, I think that's where, you know, you guys touching base before the visit, having a plan as you walk up to the home, is a wonderful thing, and it does make the parents feel like we're communicating with one another. And you know, when we've talked about this before, you go to the doctor, you report all your symptoms to the nurse, then the doctor walks in and asks you the same questions, and you report the same thing over and over. And then they send you a specialist and you tell your story again. Like, we don't want families to feel like that. And so what can we do to make those little bridges? And hey, mom, I've talked to Angie about X, Y, and Z. There anything I'm missing with what you're wanting to address today? So again, you guys can get in there and not spend time having that same conversation you probably have had with the family already. Again, this is all utopia. And I know you earlier mentioned is not utopia. So take everything I say with a grain of salt always.
I'm going to add one thing before you move on, Monica. This is Judy. One of the things I appreciate also with visits with Leslie is that we often also just talk about the coaching itself. We even had a visit this week where it was a co-visit because we both see a kiddo. So we mom scheduled us at the same time, and she's kind of new to the family. And I appreciate Leslie was vulnerable and asked, like, so was I too wordy, or how do you think mom received that? And I think having those conversations to help refine our coaching skills is really good, and feeling that it's okay to ask those questions and to not feel that need to go, oh yeah, that was great. But to really truly think of it as that opportunity to find something positive, and then maybe even find something to refine, even if it's in ourselves. Yeah, but I noticed in myself that, or something like that. But I think it's a good opportunity to practice that coaching and then reflect on it.
Yes, I don't know if Leslie's on either today, but she's honestly one of the most reflective people I know. And I've learned a lot from her just by listening to the questions she asks to make sure she's hearing what I'm saying. Not that she's hearing the same words, but the message and the interpretation is the same. And I think, again, that's where you get that alignment and have those incredibly successful visits together. Again, we talked a little bit about kind of what happens before, then what happens during the visit, and then again, that reflection after the visit. One of the pieces, I'm going to go back to what's the plan. And one of the things, I'm going to put this out there so you guys know what I hear on my end. Whenever a family calls me to talk about services, whether things are going well, whether things are not going well, one of the pieces that the questions I always put out there to them is what we're doing in a home visit meeting your learning style? And most of the time, the parent, if they're not happy with services, will say, well, no, because I learned by watching and then practicing, or I just want to watch them or make a video. So that would be one thing, is you guys are really getting ready to bring out a joint provider. Again, ask about that learning style. It's really important because I think that will help us, again, meet that parent's need. And that's the one question when parents call in, especially when they're addressing an IFSP that has multiple service providers. Sometimes they do feel like there's a lot of talking. So again, if we can take that talking piece, which we have to do to communicate with one another, but if we can move that out of the home and again, kind of help bridge that, I think that that's going to make joint visits more successful in certain times. I still think there are going to be times where, again, like you guys have talked about, you're bringing someone out because it's on the IFSP or just because the parents have asked, and that's okay too. So why
I
do
feel
a
like-
joint visit? Someone unmuted. Was that you, Susie?
No, but I can.
It was me. It was Lori.
Oh, perfect.
I just feel like I like that whole learning style and all of that right now. And I was going to say this earlier. I feel like sometimes we staff these kids after seeing them, and the parents' real need is speech. And I don't know how Karen's doing it. She's not. We're doing it together now in the beginning, but and then I'm already backing out. But holy cow, some of these kids she's gotten really behavior is we have to hit the behavior before she can hit the speech. So we're going in, and I just feel like so there's that purpose. I feel like for joint visits, of course, but we don't know that, and we're not genies in a bottle. We can't see it all when the parents are in an eval or whatever. But so I also feel like that whole learning style, like Karen is really good about, like today, grandma and mom are there, and grandma asks a ton of questions and mom doesn't ask any. Well, mom and Karen have, like, Karen knows mom's learning style. Karen was asking me questions today. And I was like, after about the second question, I was like, now I know why she's asking this, because she needs it to be in mom's language, not grandma's language. You know, it was so smooth. I caught on, but nobody else did.
I think that that's awesome. And again, that's what makes it individualized. And you know, I think about, you know, again, information that I hear from, you know, possibly during an eligibility or an IEP meeting, and how a lot of it is, again, it's terms above, it's jargon above where our parents might understand. And so knowing that you can advocate for your families by simply doing the things that Karen was doing, I think that speaks a lot to how well you know your families. And again, what you need that secondary support person to do to address the family's priorities.
Monica, I don't know if you can see the question from Nicole, but the question is, do we have any resources that discuss the different learning styles and options to help guide that conversation with parents and caregivers?
You know, I have asked a lot, and the best information that I've come across to target adult learning styles is the information embedded in Hannon's training. They're more than words, which is the same type of parent adult learning style information that's embedded into their Spark training and their 4 Eyes to Socialize. So I think that, and I've looked, and there's definitely information on adult learning styles that's very general, but not specific to how we're providing early intervention services. And I would say, like, again, if we identify, you know, gaps, that would be one thing I would say we need more of. Again, tools to navigate those questions, and how do you not just ask the surface level question, what's your best learning style? How do you learn best? But then how do you go deeper to really get that information that you need to be able and be confident you're supporting the family? For those of you that have taken Hannon's trainings, did that information speak to you about adult learning styles the same way it spoke to me? That was one of the pieces I liked the best about that training. Thank you, Teresa. I see your comment.
And I would, I guess, agree to some point. Like I thought it was really valuable, and then I kind of forgot to apply it to lots of situations that I could have.
Like all good trainings, you walk out and you feel energized and refreshed, and then you kind of go back to doing the same thing that you were doing with maybe like a twist, you know? It's really, really hard to absorb all of this information and apply it. And I mean, again, think about, what do they say, like 3% of our brains are actually like actively functioning and working, and think about all the things that are in them. So yeah, that, you know, that might be something we want to spend a little bit more time together talking about as an agency, is just delving deeper into adult learning styles. I think there's a lot there that's untapped, that we could possibly really build upon. Oh yeah, some of you guys who did the More Than Words training virtually, that might have been more independent versus presentation live. Yeah, I've already forgot about virtual training. I'm trying to just forget this ever happened. Yeah, and Teresa says she thinks of it more as kind of not, when the parent doesn't appear to be processing what they're doing and working on. Yeah, and that's really, again, a good time, I think, to address those learning styles. So that's my information per se about joint visiting. Like I said, I've got the joint visit planning tool, that PDF document, and then our TA person, her name is Misty. She's like a form wizard. And so I asked her yesterday if she had a Word document of this, knowing she didn't. And then she was like, well, I'll just make one for you. And I said, are you sure? And then she did it and I got it today. So again, maybe a little bit easier for you guys to type in, but not something that you guys need to fill out. Don't feel like you have to fill this out, but this, you know, these A through F, they might help structure it a little bit more so the visit doesn't feel, you know, so abstract, for lack of a better word. We've got about 10 minutes left. I scheduled this for an hour, and of course we can go over if you want, but as you think about, again, the strengths of things that are going well in joint visits, you know, what do we need help with? Either as an agency, what do you feel like you need help with? What are some things that are on your mind that maybe we didn't have a chance to go through, or we can spend the next few minutes processing together? And Katie, I might put you on the spot as I'm looking through who's on here. Was there anything different we talked about during the PSP cohort conversation that you felt like was really good information to share?
I think we talked a lot about those learning styles. So we went over that quite a bit and talked more about maybe when we are staffing or with consults or joint providers, talking a little bit about the parent's learning style at that, or talking a little bit at the about the parent rather than the child alone, just to kind of find somebody that fits the whole family a little better. But I think I was trying to think if there's anything else. I think you touched on everything else from that. Angie's comment too, we talked quite a bit about that, about those kids that do need so much and feeling like you're meeting all their needs with all the different providers and doing that juggling act with that, as well as giving time to honor the model and have time to practice and then reflect on what happened before, rather than jumping into another conversation at the next visit because it's a different provider.
Perfect. Thank you for sharing that, Katie.
I really like that idea of just having that extra piece in the back of our mind when we are doing primary coaching and thinking about having someone come out with us, explaining the family a little bit. I don't have any preferences with therapists as far as like, I love anybody who comes to support me, but yeah, but you know, I don't feel like we have been doing that. And usually like, oh, I can do that. That sounds fun. But also that might be helpful for that one person to know, well, this family's very busy. and mom's kind of scatterbrained. I don't know a good PC way to say that. Or, this family's kind of going through a rough time. Mom just got, some of those things are okay. Maybe we can just kind of talk about their learning style or maybe what's going on with them. And maybe that would help get maybe a little closer fit. Or some of the therapists might be like, oh, you know what? I'm going to back out of that one because that one doesn't seem like it would be my forte or something. So, because we do that for Welcome to the Program.
Yeah, we do. I remember one time Mary Ellen talked about like kind of the differences between linear learning styles and sequential learning styles, and Mary Ellen being linear, and ironically she used Nadine as an example because they're both from New York, so you would think there would be some kind of similarity, but Nadine is sequential. So Nadine can work in like a spiral and get to the center, which is also, as I look at you guys, I think Susie Dyer's like that. Like she can work, around and then finally get to it. And I'm like Mary Ellen, like I need a list and I need bullet points and I need to check them off. And so I think even those little differences are going to be helpful moving forward. And which I'm really excited about, our Lunch and Learn that we have planned on April 23rd is going to be facilitated by a gal named, yep, that's right, Lori, get her done. Facilitated by someone named Allison Horn, who is part of the Teammates Mentoring Program, which is a strength-based mentoring program that is there to support students, teachers, educators, adults. And she's going to come and talk initially to lay some foundation of what that looks like, and then do a follow-up Lunch and Learn for us as well. So we can actually take, I don't want to say a test, but we can answer some questions to help us figure out like where are our strengths and how can we use those best to support not only one another, but to support families. So it'll kind of follow the lines of years ago, we did the DISC training, looking at our personality types. This will kind of be similar, but instead it's going to be identifying those strengths and then how to use those strengths to our advantage. So that'll be something I think kind of follows along the same lines as kind of what we're talking about, adult learning styles and implementation of what we know and how to use that to move forward.
Nadine, I was just gonna comment about what you said about to know like when to kind of take yourself out of the running. And I feel like we talked quite a bit about that at the cohort meeting about that self-reflection piece and being like, you know what, like I'm not really, maybe like if we do know more about the parents, I may not be that best fit. And like, because nobody is gonna say when you ask that question, do you feel like I'd be a good fit for this family? No one is gonna be like, no. So just because everybody's so kind and wonderful, we're not going to say that. And so having a little more information, you can kind of make that decision for yourself versus putting that on somebody else to have that awkwardness with you.
Yes, that's one thing we've talked about a lot. It is, what if someone volunteers and I don't think they're a good fit? Like, how do I say that? And I think by providing information up front, kind of before you get to that point, you can help people. And I would say we have, again, 50 women, we've got an incredibly self-reflective team. And so we kind of maybe already know what our strengths are and where areas of growth might be. So by providing that foundational information, I think sometimes we automatically take ourselves out of the mix by just not speaking up. But we don't often say, I don't think I'd be a good fit for that because I make too many offhand jokes and I don't stay on topic very good. Or I'm too serious and, I really feel like mom needs a personality that's a little bit more, laid back. So I think, again, I hear those types of qualities being mentioned in team meeting during staffing. And I think it's a great thing to think about too for joint visits. I think you guys do a nice job of that. All right, I have 2:00 on the dot. I don't have anything else unless anybody else wanted to throw something out there for the good of the group. I will get this uploaded to YouTube, and I'll send out a link with the joint visit planning tools, the PDF and the Word document, so you guys can have those in your files. And yeah, we'll just keep working forward.
Thanks, Monica. This was helpful.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thanks for the discussion.